prodigal son. The parable of the elder son, the one that is so well known, is one of the best known of all the parables that Jesus spoke. We're going to listen to that parable next, but we need to remind each other and keep in mind for whom Jesus created this story. The parable of this prodigal son and the oldest son and that loving father was not written first and foremost for the tax collectors and the sinners who were already gathered with Jesus and who were busy listening to him. Although I am sure that as Jesus spoke this parable of the prodigal son, that Joe and Mike and Sally, who were sitting there, were elbowing each other. And they're saying, that's us. That's me. As Jesus was telling the story about the prodigal son leaving home, squandering his wealth, wasting the inheritance, coming to his senses, wanting to come back and begging. And then when they heard that warm welcome that Jesus talks about in the parable, that we're going to hear just a while from now, I think when they heard how the father interrupted before they could come up with all these excuses, that I think Joe and Mary and Sally, the tax collectors and the sinners, were weeping. And they're saying, that's us. That's us. And I think if they would have had the words to Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, they would have jumped up and they would have been singing and interrupting Jesus as he was telling the parable. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, now I see. I'd sing it for you, but you'd be out of the church in no time. Maybe all they had was Psalm 103. God does not treat us as our sins deserve. For as far as the east is from the west, as far as the earth is from the sky, so far has God removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on us. But the story was not first and foremost for them. The story was first and foremost a gift, graciously given from out of the compassion of Jesus' heart, out of his care for those who labored long and hard, who studied the scriptures, who longed to be close to God, who were appalled by sin in the world and sin in their own lives, who looked at the corrupted life habits of people around them and people that they also represented, and they longed for the day when sin would be no more. For them, Jesus wanted them to see and to feel God the Father's heart, to gain a sense of God's compassion for the lost and his immeasurable joy and rejoicing in seeing even one of his lost children come home for hope and help and love and life and safety. So let's listen to Jesus' story. There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. You just let your imagination run. Money, opportunity. After he had spent everything, there was severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went, and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. No one gave him anything, nothing. He's all alone. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am, I'm starving to death. I will set out and I'll go back to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men." So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with, read it with me. For this son. And he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But, and you hear the father just interrupting the story. The father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let's have and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and he's found." And so they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. Now, when he came near the house, he heard music, dancing. So he called one of his servants and he said, "What's going on here?" "Your brother's come." He replied, "Your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The old brother became angry. Refused to go in. So his father went out and he pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found." My dear friends at Fellowship, this is not a Hallmark story. It does not leave us with the main characters that we can say they lived happily ever after. Good night. Ends with mystery. The unanswered question, will the oldest son come to his senses? Will he follow the father's lead, join the feast, join the celebration of this return of his dilapidated rat of a brother who was lost and is now found, was dead and is now alive again? Thanks to the amazing, generous heart of the father. Or will he stay stuck in his anger? Will he resist his father? Go back to his hoeing of the turnips? mystery. It's a haunting question that Jesus has me take home with me at night when I put my head in the pillow. He leaves it with you. He leaves it with all of us. It's a question we have to answer. We need to answer it as church councils. We need to answer it as church communities. Who do we welcome to come? Who may sit with us as we listen and learn from Jesus? Who do we welcome at our table of the Lord here at Fellowship? To ask ourselves the question, oh, that music and the singing and the rejoicing that we have together in this room as it emanates its way out into this community, what do they hear? What do we hear? Is it the music of those on the inside or those on the outside? Is it music that delights, or is it music that, what's going on here? This past week, we had our classes meeting here, and one of the big moments that we had in the classes meeting was a discussion about church planting, which personally is a term I do not like. I do not believe we plant churches. We create relationships with people, and we help people come close to Jesus. But one of our church planters said, I wonder if there's a new culture in our midst, a culture of we no longer weep for the lost. It's a really good question to ponder. It's something to talk about when you're having your lunch later. I wonder if there's another question, though. I wonder if we've lost the ability to rejoice, to celebrate. As all the angels in heaven do when anyone, the least, the lowest, the ones we would never expect, come to Jesus because they're looking for hope and help. I didn't find a nice way to end the sermon, because I don't find Jesus' story ended in a nice way. His story was meant to have us pray and talk. I expected him to arm twist. I expected Jesus to put us in our place. But Jesus gave us a story, a gracious story for us to have time to reflect, to pray, to ponder, as he invites us to be with the Father's heart of compassion. So, I want to leave this sermon hanging for myself, for you, to continue that conversation here at Fellowship. Who do we welcome? Are we ready to celebrate in the midst of all that criticism and questions?